So I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. Yeah, did everyone eat well? Yeah. You ate too well? Still eating? Yeah. Takayo and I have a lot of pie. If anyone needs. I think we gave it away. Yeah. Yeah, we gave it to the other half of our family. And now they're stuck with it. Yeah, it was amazing to be with family. And now we're kind of out of the season of Thanksgiving. It's so quick. It's just boom, and then we're on to the next one. And the season that we're in now is Christmas. Yeah, we're in Christmas season, New Year's. And in light of that, I felt it's important that we take time and, Christmas is there most primarily to honor the birth of Jesus. That's what we honor Christmas for. Of course, we've thrown a bunch of other stuff on top of it, like St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, Christmas trees, all of their beautiful songs and whatnot. But at the essence of it, it's about Jesus. And, it's interesting that as a community, of course, our foundation is Jesus, but oftentimes we refer to biblical scripture and we give the sermons, but we don't always take time with Jesus's life and Jesus's course, his experience, and kind of the nuance and the detail there. But this was something that our Father Moon, our founder, Father and Mother Moon, always constantly referred to. They're always talking about Jesus's life and what he went through. What was his purpose? What was his essence, his intention, his hope? And one of the things that Mother Moon often asks the question of, which you can see here, is she often asks this question, and she asked this the other day. She said, "What do you think is the mission of the second coming Messiah?" What was Jesus' hope? Why did he say he would come back? This was a quote from her. She's regularly asking our most internal members, these are like the pastors of pastors, all the people that lead us, right, over there in Korea, and she's asking them these questions. What was Jesus' hope? Why did he say he would come back? She's regularly trying to bring us back to this point about Jesus and about our relationship with Jesus. And my hope is that for the next few weeks, we're just going to explore and rediscover Jesus' life more deeply from the context and understanding of the revelation that Father and Mother Moon have had about Jesus. So a lot of this content may be challenging for those that are brand new. Welcome. We are Los Angeles Family Church, Family Federation, and we're excited to share this with you because, my experience with Jesus has been interesting. I love this photo. It's one of my favorite photos of Takayo and I, mainly because I'm not balding yet. I'm just kidding. This is a few years ago, and this was here at the church when we had the church here. So my context is my parents, the way that I was raised was my mom and dad would take me to the family church here. Well, we would be all over the place. We've had, 10 different homes in the last 15 years, right? And, right after church would end, they would take me then to a Christian church. And so I would go from our family church, which as a kid, honestly speaking, I slept through most services. And then I always tell this story, but, I would get so frustrated with church, Uncle Nasser, that I would leave. I would try to run away. And I would together with Ryan McCarthy, if anyone remembers him, we'd go hide in the parking lot. And then Uncle Jose would come out looking like a mafia, like a security guard, and searching around looking for me. Maybe because my dad was in the choir, he couldn't do it. But I don't know. That's always a bold memory for me. It's exciting running away from Uncle Jose. Please don't do this if you're young. I mean, we'll go chase after you. But so I would go to our church here, and then they would take me to another church that I would fall asleep at. And it would be, our Pentecostal Southside LA church. And so they would, I remember each one of those pastors, I remember all of them. I can't recall a lot of memories from that time when I was younger. But I can recall one that really struck me. And we were at this pastor's church. Maybe I actually didn't ask you, Dad and Mom, what his name was. But he had a missing finger, this pastor, and he knew us for a long time. Pastor Wood. Pastor Wood. And one time, and I kind of came from this Family Federation crowd, so it's not usual to hear like what would take place for someone that lives in Southside LA, for example. And one of those church services, they did a prayer. If you remember this, they were praying over one of their members who had just been kind of put in prison. And he was going to be in prison for a long time. And they were doing a massive prayer for him. And I was shocked by this as a young guy. I was like, wow, this church is praying over this man, praying for this man who was just put in prison. And it was shocking for me because as a young person, I don't have a lot of family. I don't have a lot of relationships where people have been put in prison. And I wasn't, that hadn't been taking place, at least in my circle of this church community. And it was amazing. It was kind of eye-opening for me, that moment. Just like, oh gosh, this is the life of these people, the challenges that they're faced with. And as a young person, kind of discovering Jesus was an interesting course for me. And as I grew up and I matured and my relationship with Jesus grew, I discovered something that I realized I didn't readily receive while I was in our Family Federation church so much. And that was forgiveness. It was forgiveness. My relationship with Jesus unfolded in the realm of forgiveness. In our church community, we often say it's like the indemnity course. The course of if you do something wrong, you have to make up for it and you overcome through responsibility taken. And of course, this is the way. This is really important. We don't believe in, as in the Christian community, we call it cheap grace, where you just, I'm forgiven, so I'll do whatever the heck I want for 6 days and come back and be forgiven again on Sunday. We don't believe in that. We don't like that because we understand God's heart. One thing we affirm in this community is that we know that God has a heart. God is our heavenly parent, is hurting when he sees us hurting. And so therefore, we have a responsibility to not hurt God's heart. So how I live my life, whether I am given grace or not, should be the best that I can live my life. The dark side of that is that you don't receive grace at all. You realize that if I do something wrong and I hurt God's heart, then I'm a bad person. I'm somehow an evil person. Somehow and I'm going to make up for this for the rest of my life. This kind of vibration or kind of thinking. And so my relationship with Jesus unfolded in the realm of forgiveness. Because I realized that one beautiful thing that we can't forget is that Jesus did die for our sins. He did. He did. And because of that, we receive redemption and grace through his blood that he shed on the cross. This is what we believe. It may not always be what we emphasize, but it is what we believe. And so what I'm going to do today is a little bit different. Usually, actually, I don't have a laptop. I just kind of share weird stories with you all. But I actually I'm going to do something a little different for the next 6 weeks even, but especially today, it's going to be kind of more of a lecture or a teaching. I don't know if it will necessarily inspire, but I hope that it will educate us on understanding Jesus' course, Jesus' heart. And we're going to unfold this over 6 weeks, of course. But I want to just start with kind of the overarching purpose, the essence of Jesus, and why he came. Why God sent his son. And even for us as those who are raised in this movement or maybe don't have a relationship with Christianity, I hope that it will bring us closer to Jesus. Because I believe, and as we understand that Father and Mother Moon were called by Jesus and stand on his foundation to bring restoration to the family. That's why we honor them. So we bring from individual restoration to the family level restoration, substantial restoration in our families. That's our goal. But that stands on a foundation that's laid by Jesus. By Jesus. And so if we miss the source, we actually misunderstand their calling, their purpose, their reason. And I think that's what Mother Moon is trying to say. That's why she's constantly asking even our top leaders, do you understand? These questions. Do you understand what Jesus' hope really was? Do you really grasp it? Does it resonate with your spirit? Maybe intellectually you understand it, but does it really stimulate your heart to the point where you can cry tears for Jesus because you know what he went through and you know what his desire was? So, where it all begins, I believe, is right here. God's original ideal. And this is something, for those that are studying divine principle, you've seen this 100 times. Katsuko-san has whipped open the napkin, and she's drawn the circles, 1, 2, 3, and you're like, what the heck are these circles? Where Takanadi's got the circles. But this is powerful truth. This is the foundation of everything. In Genesis 1:27, 1:28, God blesses man. He blesses them with 3 great blessings. The first is to be fruitful, meaning to mature. Many people misunderstand. They think it has something to do with giving birth. Actually, it's before birth. It's getting to the point of maturity so that you are blessed to be able to give birth to offspring. So it's to be fruitful, to mature yourself, your mind and body centered on God. You become a mature individual in God's eyes. The second blessing is to multiply, meaning that a mature man and a mature woman come together in harmony and intimacy and build a beautiful, harmonious family. This is the second blessing. Third blessing is to have dominion, where those families come together as a harmonious people and take care of the world. And we build a harmonious world. This is God's ideal. If that's news to you, please take a photo of it. This is it. This is the blueprint that God established at the very beginning of creating mankind. And oftentimes, we skip over it. But this is it. This defines our life. It directs us. It provides a vision. All of it is there. That is the kingdom of heaven on earth, God's ideal. Obviously, that wasn't realized, and then we address what went wrong. Because of the fall, because of man's separation from God, distance from God, Satan became the center of our mind and our body, and we became immature people. Immature people met immature other people, immature man, immature woman, and we created divided families, broken families, painful nations, damaged world. And that damaged individuals, divided people, couldn't take care of the nature around us. And so now we see the results of that, the results of it. And God in Genesis 6:6 describes, this is a powerful verse, and it repented the Lord, this is God, that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. Meaning that God, despite wanting children so badly, regretted the fact that he had children at all because of how hurt he was, how painful it was. Gosh, I don't have children yet. But I can imagine that, to arrive at that point of pain is incredible. Something really went wrong. So God's family and the kingdom was lost. And now the hope is that we can somehow be reborn spiritually and restore that kingdom substantially. We can actually build the kingdom of heaven here on earth. That's the hope. That's the dream. But we can only get there if someone can model the path of breaking through in these 3 great blessings. Someone has to model that path. Someone has to walk this course of the principle and be able to realize God's ideal, to show the world, to open up the gateway for the world to walk through. Who is that person? Who can restore all of that one by one, blessing after blessing, and be able to realize the ideal? That person whom God had prepared for 4,000 biblical years, generations and generations and generations, was this man, Jesus Christ, whom God sent as his only begotten Son to be able to break through. After losing everything, God put everything, he put all of his stakes, all of his bets on one man, that this man, Jesus Christ, will be able to accomplish what my children could not do at the very beginning. So even though I regret making man, I can still do this. You can imagine God is like this wayfaring stranger. It's a beautiful song, if anyone's ever heard it. It's a beautiful, powerful song of just trying to find your way to a home. And God places all of his bets, 4,000 years of investment, to get to one person that would be able to stand and build his family. That's Jesus. So you have to realize, like, it was all of God's entire essence to be able to pour out to find a son, to send his son. So then the Messiah's mission, Jesus' mission, would have been nothing less than to fulfill the ideal of God, right? It would have been nothing less than to fulfill that ideal. Would it be anything less than that? Would it make sense for Jesus just to do a little bit? All of this, everything for this man to show up, just to accomplish a little something? No way. His responsibility would be to remove Satan completely from the picture. In other words, total salvation, meaning everybody finds their way back to God. And so it would look a little bit like this. Jesus would stand as that mature person, fulfilling the first blessing. His mind and body are one with God. One with God. And so in 2 Corinthians 4:4 it says, sorry, this is very small, but Satan, who is the god of this world, has blinded the minds of those who don't believe. They are unable to see the glorious light of the good news. They don't understand the message about the glory of Christ, who is the exact likeness of God. So this verse is describing it, that Jesus would be like a reflection of God because his mind and body are one with God. And this is what he accomplished. And then he would go and become the mature man. Jesus is not a woman, last I checked. So Jesus would stand as the mature man. And he would then be able to find a mature woman whom he would build a family with. This is the second greatest blessing of all that God has given to humanity. God wants us to be in marriage. He wants us to have a family. He wants us to build a beautiful community, a nation, and a world. And it's built on the foundation of families. So Jesus, coming as a mature man, would find someone that he would be in holy matrimony with to be able to build God's family substantially. Then they would take that into the world and build this harmonious world. So this just makes sense when we understand the blueprint of God. That's why Mother Moon's often asking us, please go back to the blueprint. Please go back to the original ideal. If you don't understand how these three great blessings are meant to unfold, then we miss the point of what Jesus was called to do in the first place. Total salvation would require Jesus to be able to have that opportunity. So Jesus came to build the kingdom, restoring the three great blessings, bring all people into oneness as one family under God. And this is where I want to be very clear. When Father Moon was sitting at the age of 16 and he has his encounter with Jesus, he comes to a realization that Jesus' heart is broken. Now, all that we've built for 2,000 years, but Jesus' heart is still longing because something went wrong at that time. Something that wasn't God's original plan. And Jesus had to piece together all of this to be able to build something beautiful. But at the same time, he knew that something still wasn't yet there. So I want to unpack that. I think we need to understand by Jesus' own words what he was struggling with. And for those that have heard this a million times, then please just hold on to these verses because they should help us to re-edify our understanding. And the first is that Jesus calls us to believe. Jesus calls us to believe. This is one of the first things he calls us to do. He comes down from the mountain after fasting and defeating Satan. He confirms that he is totally one with God. Satan tries all that he can try. Tries to give him bread. Tries to give him the whole world. But he denies it all. He comes out and he says very clearly to all of humanity one clear thing: believe in the one whom he has sent. Believe. And so Mark 1:15, the time has come, he said, the kingdom of God is near. Repent and believe the good news. Matthew 4:17, from that time on, Jesus began to preach, repent for the kingdom of heaven is near. John 6:28-29, then they asked him, what must we do to do the work that God requires? And Jesus answers very clearly, the work of God is this, to believe in the one whom he has sent. So when you believe in someone, I need to ask you honestly, this is where Father Moon and Mother Moon are challenging us. If you are being called to believe, say, Reverend Tang is saying, believe in me, believe what I'm trying to say. If I follow that, if that is my God-given work, is my response to my believing in Reverend Tengen to go and not believe in him for one and go and kill him? Because I don't like what he said? If I'm doing the work, that would be the work of Satan. If this is the work of God to believe, then to believe means that I follow, that I live with this person. I give my life to you because you're asking me to believe in you. I'm placing my heart in your heart. So Jesus calls us to believe, not to kill, not to take his life. He calls us to believe in him who he has sent, to believe in me. He goes on, Matthew 23:37. This is powerful. He says, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets, stones God's messengers. How often I have wanted you to gather your children together as a hen protects her chicks beneath her wings, but you wouldn't let me." This is clear. Jesus desires to protect them, but they won't allow him to. This is long, but this is really, for me, this is when it really unfolded for me. In John 8:37-42, and he's talking to Abraham's descendants. And he says, "Yes, I realize that you are descendants of Abraham. And yet some of you are trying to kill me because there's no room in your hearts for my message. I'm telling you what I saw when I was with my father. But you are following the advice of your father. Our father is Abraham," they declared. "No," Jesus replied, "for if you were really the children of Abraham, you would follow his example. Instead, you are trying to kill me because I told you the truth, which I heard from God. Abraham never did such a thing. No, you are imitating your real father." He's talking about Satan. They replied, "We aren't illegitimate children. God himself is our true father." And Jesus tells them, "If God were your father, you would love me because I have come to you from God. I am not here on my own, but he sent me." Jesus is directly refuting their claim. They want to kill him. They want to take his life. He's causing too much of an uproar. He's getting famous. He's getting known. People don't like him. He's saying things that are quite bold. He's saying that he's the Son of God. He's the King of the Jews. All sorts of things he's saying to these people, and they don't like it. But what does he say? "Instead, you are trying to kill me because I told you the truth, which I heard from God, but Abraham would never have done such a thing. If God were your father, you would love me. When I love someone, I don't kill them. When I love someone, I don't kill them." So please hold on to that as we understand the heart of Jesus. We often write this rhetoric or this narrative about Jesus that's been written for thousands of years, hundreds of years. And this narrative of Jesus is that Jesus came so that he could die. What Father and Mother Moon are trying to say is that Jesus had to die, but it wasn't the first will of God. The first will of God would be that the people of that time would love me, believe, trust in the one whom he has sent. So Jesus came for the kingdom. Jesus came to fulfill this. And we know that. I'm going to just have more verses for you all to kind of digest. Matthew 23:13, he says, "What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, you Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut the door to the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You won't go in yourselves, and you don't let others enter either." This is referring to their lack of faith, their lack of trust in him. If I shut the door to the kingdom of heaven on someone's face, I'm denying them entry into what God's plan is for them, right? These Pharisees, these men of religious law, these great teachers, they're going against the will of God, denying the kingdom. Luke 19:41-44, again, long verse, but please digest this well with me. But as he came closer to Jerusalem and saw the city ahead, he began to weep. How I wish today that you of all people would understand the way to peace. But now it's too late, and peace is hidden from your eyes. Before long, your enemies will build ramparts against your walls and encircle you and close in on you from every side. They will crush you into the ground and your children with you. Your enemies will not leave a single stone in place because you did not recognize it when God visited you. They didn't recognize. This is important for us to inherit in this time. If we don't recognize the time of God's visitation, the ramparts will be built around your walls. And Mother Moon often refers to this. She doesn't like to get very doomsday with us, but she does tell us seriously, if we miss the time of visitation, always, history has proven this by fact, always indemnity follows. Always something follows. So Jesus came for the kingdom, but he was denied that opportunity. So from that time on, this is Matthew 16. So in Luke, in Mark, and in Matthew, they describe a moment where Jesus has an encounter in the spiritual realm. It's the Mount of Transfiguration. Have all of you heard of this? The Mount of Transfiguration. Basically, he takes his 3 core disciples with him to this mountain, Tabor. Tabor is what they think is the mountain's name. And at the top of that mountain, he has an encounter with Moses and Elijah, a spiritual encounter. We don't know what they talked about. I wasn't there. The disciples that were writing this, they weren't there. But he comes down from the mountain, and from that time on, Matthew 16:21, from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things. So in Mark, there is a moment where right before he gets to the mountain, he starts to predict his death. But he becomes very clear about it after the Mount of Transfiguration, meaning that there is a moment in the Bible where his tone changes. He shifts. His idea shifts. At first, his idea is believe. He calls on the faith, and he continues to call on the faith until the very moment it all ends. He continues to call on the faith, but in this moment, he starts to teach them a new thing. And the new thing that he starts to predict to them is that the man who's been sent by God must die. And this is often where we can get confused. We misunderstand. But this was a shift, because already the people had chosen to go against Jesus, had chosen not to listen. So the dispensation of God, meaning God's plan changes. It shifts from kingdom to now, Jesus, you have to go the way of the cross. We call this a secondary dispensation of God, God's plan B. And God's plan B is that ideally Jesus would come and be able to fulfill the 3 great blessings and build God's kingdom here on earth, and it would be a beautiful thing, sit on the throne of David as it's predicted in Isaiah, to be able to substantially stand, and Rome would have been covered, and it would have spread, and we call it the preparatio evangelium, right? The gospel was prepared to be spread all across Europe, and he would have stood on that throne and led the people back to God. Totality, total salvation, all of God's investment, 4,000 years for one man to be able to do this together as a family. So he'd find this mature woman and be able to build God's family. That was God's hope. However, it requires the faith of the people whom God has chosen. The Jewish people at that time needed to believe, and they chose not to. So God's plan B is that, okay, they won't listen. We can't build that kingdom. I have to send my son to die. This is a shift in providence. But from the perspective of God, this is God sending his son to his death. No father, no mother should ever have to go through such a thing. But this is the reality of what follows when the chosen people don't choose to believe. So this dispensational shift, Jesus walks a secondary course because the Jewish people failed. Jesus never fails. Jesus is one with God. Jesus is perfect. He has to follow the will of heaven. So he walks the course to at least offer spiritual salvation for humanity through his blood on the cross. And that's why he can say such words. Everyone wonders, why did he say this? Well, why did he say, forgive them? They don't know what they're doing. Was these just nice words to say? Were these moments of weakness? What was this? Why does he say in the Garden of Gethsemane, please let this cup pass from me, but not of your will, but not my will, but your will? Why does he say such things? It's because God had another will, but the people wouldn't allow it to take place. So then Christ has to return. If everything was done, if everything was complete, Jesus would not have to come back. There'd be no reason. Everything is done. But he has to come back. Why? Because total salvation is left unaccomplished. The three great blessings are left unaccomplished. And particularly, at that time, Jesus could have built a beautiful family. And if he found a mature woman, and we call Jesus an only begotten son, that woman would be called an only begotten daughter. And that person must be found. It's incomplete. And so Jesus gives us hope. And when he comes, Hebrews 9:28 is very clear. Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many people. But he will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him. To bring something more, but not to die. So the cross offers us grace of redemption, atonement by the blood. This is our spiritual salvation. But we know the reality is that even though we're spiritually saved, as I am, I'm forgiven. I got the grace. I got the grace. I still have challenges in my substantial life. I may personally have the grace, but I still have the issue with my relationships, the most substantial thing in the world, which is my relationships. The family still needs restoration. And Apostle Paul's very clear on this. He's struggling. Apostle Paul, the best of us, is struggling with this challenge. He's like, oh, wretched man that I am. Who will deliver my body of this death? I'm still struggling with the law, with the sin of my flesh. His challenge. So if Christ returns, when Christ returns, it's to fulfill the three great blessings. Bring total salvation. Give rebirth to humanity into God's lineage. We call that substantial salvation. Restoration of families. That's Christ's returning mission. And that would bring about the kingdom of heaven on earth. So I really believe that Jesus is, Jesus' hope at that time. This is the context. And now I hope you can understand what Jesus really came to do. Came to build God's family. But because the people couldn't believe, he lost the ability to do so. So he has to come again to accomplish that. And we believe that Father and Mother Moon are called to fulfill that mission, called to accomplish that, called to somehow bring God's family back to God, bring God's children back to God. And so that's our foundation. That's what we stand for. That's why we're the busiest church in the world, because we believe that God is waiting for that day. But I do think we have to challenge the notion of what, in the way that we've believed over the last 2023 years. We have to pray desperately and feel and resonate with Jesus' heart of sorrow. How Jesus felt at that time, to be stripped from the one thing that God would wish to give him. the opportunity to have a family, to have children, to build something beautiful. And so I know as we digest that, that may be challenging. And what I encourage you, and always our encouragement is, sure, we'll do the music. Our encouragement is to pray. Pray deeply, asking God. And then for those who've been a part of this is just a recap for you. This is your chance to grow deeper in your heart, in your relationship to Jesus. And when you do so, I believe it'll bring you closer to our true parents. So thank you. And yeah.